Revive Ministries Podcast. This month's theme is remembering our stories, finding hope. As we head close to the end of the year, we may find the temptation to compare our lives generally to those who live around us. Just by my experience, this only discredits the experience when it's faced, both whether it's positive or negative, and can make it harder to remember the lessons we have endured. This time of year also may be hard for many people as they reflect on those who are no longer with us today. This month's theme, I would like to encourage those who are struggling around this time of year to find a community to connect with. If you are in need also, please ask for help. Today, I will reflect on this topic to start this month off when it comes to remembering our stories, finding hope. I just remember doing a similar theme the last few years, and I think the exact word for word title last year when it comes to this month. December, a lot of times, understandably, can be a very happy time for those surrounded by family and loved ones, and a very sorrowful one for those who are feeling a sense of loss. As we grow older, this sense of loss may be more pronounced as we remember times past. And as I said, the holidays, whether you are faith-based or not, this time of year can be hard generally as there's an emphasis on the ending of the year. And also, just like to reiterate, when it comes to our lives, it's very easy to go either or generally, or black and white. But usually that it's not so much that it may alleviate the initial discomfort, but like I said, from my experience, it only discredits the experience one has faced. And especially the most important thing, it's not so much that it's discredit, which is important, but more any lessons that I've learned are just so becomes less and less personalized. And obviously it's difficult to navigate for those who are struggling. It gets increasingly hard to navigate when we forget the things we've learned. Like I said, if you are in need, if you're struggling, or you just, as an adult, it's harder for us to ask for that help. Today I would like to reflect, like I said, on this month theme. To start us off, disclaimer, if you are in the States, 988 is a suicide crisis lifeline. I do encourage you to, if you do feel that you are at risk, that you may harm yourself, or any such case, finding professional help immediately is what I encourage. If you are, like many people who may be listening, maybe from other parts of the world, I've been starting to kind of share other hotlines and stuff. Hong Kong emergency number is 999. Suicide hotline is 852-2382-0000. Hungary, the emergency line is 112, and the suicide hotline is 116-123. And in India, emergency line is 112, and the suicide hotline is 888-888-17666. If you go to my website, I do have more of this information when it comes to other countries, though I do encourage you to stay updated with any changes your country may have when it comes to these kind of services. With that being said, I'd like to start off, just like I said, people have said it most likely better than I have, and Henry David Thoreau says it this way: it's not what you think. No, it's not what you look at that matters. It's what you see. So, for instance, I feel, judging by my own experience, I could, especially with mental health, if you have been one who suffered in the past, or just the healing and the understanding of it can seem translucent. When I was really in the thick of it, I don't remember even seeing myself improve the way traditionally you would say. So it's not what you look at that matters, but what you see. So if I equate to myself as not being quote unquote successful, or me not being well, it can shape and kind of guide and be that compass for me. If a person who is unable to, who struggles with whatever manner, maybe it's an injury per se, a sports injury, it's how you see it. It can be a big factor. So it's another thing that plays into it is expectations and being present. So especially with mental health, I'll speak on that regard. Mental health is inconvenient. A lot of times we may get some comfort, or we may get some understanding or some perspective that may be helpful or even encouraging. However, a lot of times the symptoms and the things that a lot of people suffering from mental illness sometimes forget is that it is also an illness. So symptoms and stuff, even though you gain understanding, doesn't necessarily mean that you will immediately just become better. So that's one thing. And also allowing, especially it's harder, it can be harder with mental health and other illnesses that do have a lot of shame attached to it, is to allowing oneself to get better and to have those boundaries that create a more individual perspective. One of the statements I've seen and I've heard and I've said even myself is, why is this happening to me? This shouldn't happen to me. And those statements are understandable, and especially with context. However, they're not very helpful when I look at not very helpful of how I look at the world and how I see myself in it. I guess, especially with thinking about this quote, it just really defines how I even I begin to narrate my my story. So, for instance, if I'm learning a language, it may seem for a long time that I don't know how to say things very well, or I don't feel there's any improvement. But people outside will be like, wow, the person is doing better, or the subtleties. But a lot of times ourselves, we don't really notice them. I could say that feels very similar to healing, as in regards to mental health. It is something that's sometimes translucent or ambiguous to even notion that you are getting better, when you feel there's just this unsurmountable, even dare I say, dread of where you're not or where you would like to be. And sometimes those ideas and those dreads are so generalized, and even though it seems nice, it's not very individualized to the person's context, which, as I began this episode, it can be, I feel it can be problematic, especially if we forego the lessons we may have learned. Brandon Sanderson, he's a fantasy and science fiction writer, says, the purpose of storytelling is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think upon. So, sometimes a good story, at least, it's never finite. It's never like, okay, this is it. Open. At least good stories allows that pliability to kind of expand. When you make a statement, it is a lot of times very closed. Sometimes, and it doesn't provide insight or depth from the individual listening to that statement. But when we start to question our stories, when it comes to remembering our stories, it can provide more insight and more depth. And at least from my perspective, I feel like it can actually be a helpful tool, especially navigating and how seeing like in the beginning, as how Henry David Thoreau says, it can help you kind of look at matters in a different angle, and I feel that can be very advantageous, especially during the more difficult bits when there is less things feeling. Let me just say, you feel stuck. Don't feel that anything is moving forward. But I think reframing, as law may say, or refocusing on and remembering, as whether you're faith-based or not, the concept of remembering. This podcast is not, again, it's not proselytizing. It's not, but also it's really just encouraging those who are brave enough to share and to discuss. And I say this as a prompt because I know in the name of Revive Ministries it does suggest a proselytizing nature. But with that said, remembering is a concept biblically that is always kind of emphasized. And I do feel like in my faith and just remembering, the importance of remembering, I think it can, at least it can be very helpful on someone's journey as they navigate. So why am I going this angle of explaining? Because it's a concept that's been a struggle for the longest, whether you believe there is a God or not. One thing that kind of is hard to one concept that's always present is remembering our lives. As we get older, remember the things we wish we'd done better, or remember the things that we accomplished. But especially nowadays, as I have family members who have maybe experienced dementia or signs of that, or even Alzheimer's, you begin to see them how devastating it is when one doesn't remember. So with that being said, I do feel that going back to the title, Remember Stories, Finding Hope, the act of remembering in itself can bring hope. Albert Einstein says it this way: Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning. I think, especially as life keeps ever changing, it's and we may want to box things into a more manageable concept, good like that. Um, Either overgeneralize or oversimplifies, and I feel, at least from my experience, it can be more a bit more of a disadvantage. Just a lot of uncertainty that can feel overwhelming. From my experience, taking steps to mitigate those stressors. Um, it's not eliminating stress, because that's almost impossible. And also not very helpful from from my perspective. There are stresses that all of us, may actually um, welcome. In the sense of, if there's expecting mother or father, um, expecting parents per se, they're experiencing stress to get prepared their home for their new child. So, or a person who's been studying for years, and they're they're you know they're having that healthy stress of gaining a new level of education with all the hard work they put into it. So I think defining words and defining what they mean to us is, as as a more of an individual basis, can be more helpful than overgeneralizing. Oh, why is this taking so hard? Oh, this shouldn't happen to me. And for one vantage point, I'd be like, oh, why are you complaining? Well, it's not really that. It just doesn't really work well, you know. And I think Albert Einstein's approach of never just stop questioning, I feel it gives at least from my perspective, it revitalizes um, our approach to ourselves. So, the question I ask, and I've been asking, is, am I allowed to get better? Or when working with clients, are you allowed to get better? And sometimes the second question could be, do you want to get better? Which a lot of us may have heard before. But both, thinking deeper, are you allowed to get better, really speaks on, are we making more boundaries or are we putting ourselves, or how can I say even better, are we ourselves being the boundaries for us moving forward? It's a scary place out there. So if you experience a lot of things that have been negative, or have seemed to kind of to fall on the wayside, or just doesn't seem to be very helpful. When I say, are you allowed to get better? Are you allowed to revisit those things? And just like Albert Einstein said, learn from yesterday. Are you allowed to take time to learn from yesterday? Are you allowed to live for today and hope for tomorrow? And that means setting aside time for you. AI, I don't know, was it Al Sebert? Hopefully I messed it up too much. Resiliency is something you do more than something you have. You become highly resilient by continuously learning your best way of being yourself in your circumstances. So it's like a continuous action. I do like this quote, because a lot of things in our lives are, especially now, is convenience based. Whether it's so I could get all the insurance, or I could get all the packages. I could go on the cruise with the premium package, with everything, saying to me that I will enjoy myself in this cruise. However, the fact of the matter is, I'm still bringing me in this cruise, which is a variable about how I reframe or see myself at that present moment. So, we can make a lot of things easier. And I think sometimes we have to be mindful, especially with friendships, if there has been, or relationships, if they have been kind of not working out well, but then instead of talking about the things that bother you, you just kind of do these things that kind of push life into them and make things seem better. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. That means sometimes you may need to have those tough conversations. So, and I think how Al Sabert talks about resiliency, I think it was very, at least it speaks volumes to me, because it does not make it seem, does not make it appear to be some point that you just get to. It's a continuous thing that will look different for every individual seeking it. So resiliency is not that you actually sometimes seek out. I think a lot of times resiliency can be answering the question, are you allowed to get better? And then yourself saying yes. And then making those, looking about not of how that may occur. So, for example, financially, something very expensive, you're like, I can't afford that. I can never afford that. Or you say, instead of saying that, saying, how can I afford that? How can I make steps to get there? So, the person saying these two statements are both maybe in the same financial disadvantage to get where they want to go. However, one says immediate statement, I can't afford it, period. While the other one asks the question of how can I get there? And also the nice thing about asking questions is, do I want to get there? Is it that important to get there? And I feel that is more, can be more helpful. A lot of times when we say we can't do anything, even though it can become a habit, and it relinquishes any kind of accountability, or so it's easier to lean on general statements when you are confronted with this. But I do like I said, how resiliency is depicted in this quote. Gonna pause just for a moment about updates and reflective moments. Revive Ministries is, it's 2019 or 2024, so about 5 years, give or take, doing this podcast, and it's been a wonderful experience. Any updates? Really, it's trying new aspects for people to share. Not everyone wants to talk or share about their stories or feel confident. So I'm hoping in the future to open up other avenues for people to express what they're going through. Trying to model Revive Ministries to be a safe place for those people who don't feel that they're a lot of times heard. I originally, and I am a Christian myself. However, the name Revive Ministries has very little to do with proselytizing in any sense. The revive element for me is to revitalize conversations that usually get thrown under the rug, and also a sense of community that, whatever part of the world you're from, whatever you're been through, that hopefully these topics will be something that will be helpful for you, at least that may encourage you to get help, or to find a community, or to try something that might be helpful. This is not a place that will have all the answers, but we'll continue to discuss the things that are harder for us to discuss. So I just want to put a nod to those who have been guests. So, and also to just say as an update for Revive Ministries that we're going to continue doing what we're doing. Some things will continue to be reshaped, and I may start to find other methods to keep everyone updated, in the sense of what's new and what's coming up, and if you want to be a part of it. And I do encourage you, info at reviveministryfl.com, if you ever wanted to, if you know, or you feel like you want to be a guest but you don't know how, or if you know someone they feel may be a good guest, or if you have any comments or anything that you would like to say, and in regards to that. And then I guess that in a sense that's most of the updates when it comes to Revive Ministries with myself. Not much to report. Things are going well. I'm thinking about how long I've been doing the podcast, and just how I was afraid to do it at first because of just I was used to in person, and it is either, I say, I'm not clairvoyant, I don't know the future, but it was 2019 October, November when I did my first podcast, and prior to that I was worried about I didn't want to take away from my face-to-face, but I would say in the religious sense, I would say it was a huge blessing. On the practical sense, also, just in general, I was very lucky to be brave enough to do a podcast, which I never thought of doing in 2019. And I just want to say, those who have listened, those who have supported, those who have been guests, I just want to say thank you. Moving on, like I said, and I always say at the end of this podcast, just go to the website, see to see any updates. We try to update as best we can. However, any questions or anything you want to, or you want to be a guest or yourself, please just email, and we're always trying to see and have more people on. We do like our reoccurring guests. However, we also like to expand the table per se. With that being said, continue on the theme of remembering our story, finding hope. Booker T. Washington says this way: there are two ways to exert one's strength. One is pushing down, the other is pulling up. Now, taking the role of being a support, a lot of times I may hear, I don't know how to support. Sometimes, most times, it's less about the specific thing you can do, but more about presence. So I like how Booker T. Washington says, describe strength. And I encourage those, especially those who maybe you're in a church community, maybe you're just in a group or social. I would encourage those who are listening. You don't have to understand someone to be kind. And a lot of times you won't really understand why one does what they do, But, if we're talking about strength, from my perspective and actually my experience, I'm hoping that we're ones who pull people up versus push them down. Helen Keller says this, and I feel this is encouraging. Although the world is full of suffering, it's also full of overcoming of it. We can emphasize, obviously, the negative. We can overemphasize the negative. Not to minimize negative in our lives, but I think Helen Keller her words are inspiration. With the barriers she had, just like many who spoke like this how we, it kind of goes back to what the first quote from David Thoreau. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. So what do you see when you see yourself? Are you a person that is allowed to get better? Are you a person that is valued? Maybe not make the best choices, but who has made every right choice? We all have made mistakes in some shape or form. So if you are struggling now, a lot of times when I ask the question to people I'm working with is, are you allowed to get better? It almost becomes, of course. Of course. Why would, that's a weird question. But when we think about that question a little deeper, are we allowed to get better? That means, are you allowed to try something new? Because a lot of times we may get frustrated trying to solve the problems in the way that we created them, or try to solve problems that haven't been able to be solved in that manner. Mark Twain says it this way: courage is the resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not the absence of fear. So a lot of times fear can be a big catalyst for us feeling stuck. And I might be butchering this, but in Dune, fear is the mind killer, But fear does have, can be very negative. But fear is also a survival instinct. So if I am afraid of a dangerous thing or place or fill in the blank, it can be actually helpful. So it's how we define fears. But I do like that Mark Twain doesn't say we need to obliterate fear. No, it's just how do we resist the negative bits? How do we master it? Understanding a lot of things will be scary, especially if you've never done it before. Do you feel our strengths give us? Do you feel our stories give us strength? And how so? I do. I feel they do. I feel when we are telling our story, and we're able to tell our story in a way that it gives yourself a voice. A lot of times I feel what gets robbed, whether it's mental health, whether it's diabetes, whether it's other diagnosis that has a lot of negative connotations. If we don't tell our stories, it feels we can get lost in the mix of generalization. I have, and it's more apparent with mental health that a person with major depressive disorder, two people with major depressive disorder standing right next to each other, same age, maybe even the same area where they live, completely different. Completely different, I say, in how they respond to treatment, what may be helpful, what may not. So I think it's extremely helpful, especially when you're navigating through chronic illness like that, or just navigating through problems, maybe at work or in life, relational. these can, remembering your stories can remember some lessons. So yes, I do think it gives us strength because it doesn't, it allows us to maybe even find other avenues to address something that has been problems that has been a problem, or just troublesome in general. Viktor Frankl says it this way: the last of human freedoms is one's ability to choose one's attitude in a given set of circumstances. It's similar like to the whole example, and I've heard this heard this said on several times in different ways, but finance is a great example of this. So if, let's say, I want to, the notion of getting something like a house, especially now, the house market has been hard for those to afford. So let's say a house. Person A, person B, both make the same income. We're just making this up. Person A was told, hey, how about you buy this? What do you think about trying to buy this house? Person A is like, I can't afford that. There's no way. And then person B, same situations, just as a thought exercise, same amount of debt. This person A, similar job, similar salary, all this stuff, whatever case would be. Person B says, instead of saying, I can't, it's like, how can I afford it? How will I be able to afford that? What steps can I take to afford that? And even more so, do I want to afford that? So the question stops with the statement, I cannot afford that. So I feel when it comes to attitude and what we choose, it can be vital. So the problem is, the person who says I can't afford it, the conversation ends there. There's no different with mental illness or any other illnesses. I can never get better. Wow, where do you go from there? But how can I get better? What steps can I do to make myself better? Or better yet, on the same notion, am I allowed to get better? And saying yes, I'm allowed to get better. But how do I get there? So yeah, I do really appreciate how Viktor Frankl focuses on in this comment, this quote about attitude. How we could have money, we could have financial stability at any given moment, but have a poor attitude of it. And that also goes with not only our financial stability, but also our physical and mental stability. And remembering our stories, as this month's theme is, allows us to navigate it with more, current and accurate information about where one is, as opposed to where one wants to be in a general sense. And I feel logically, if nothing else, you're pulling from information that is specific to you versus a general census, which, granted, why I say logically is that you're going to find more accuracy when you just use the context of yourself versus what is generally seen and what's generally done. So in that aspect, I do feel it's more encouraging and maybe more helpful when you do remember your story, and when you do that in navigating through some of these hard times. But just like on top of that, it's how our attitudes are towards that can even spark the conversation or even the question, and that may be helpful. As we reflect on our stories and present status, what has helped you move forward? Patterns, understanding myself, having mental illness. I have to remember my story. I have to understand what works and what doesn't. I have to understand time and expectations. I understand that if I wake up one day and I feel it's going to be a hard day, not to ignore it. There's certain coping skills that I use when I am very stressed. There's also certain things or avenues I can do to cathartically work through some of my feelings that I go through. Setting boundaries, understanding and being able to learn to say no. These are all little aspects that has helped me. And as I reflect on my story, I'm reminding of what worked and what doesn't work. However, navigating that gets easier when I practice reflecting on my story and my present status. So, what has helped me move forward? It's kind of like what this quote says. I don't have the assumption that I'm going to just get somewhere. It's just going to be all figured out. It's more that it's going to be a constant flow. But there's something rewarding. I begin to find better or more effective ways that are intrinsically connected to me because I'm trying to stay not only present with my with the status today, but also reminded of my story and what got me to where I'm at. So it's not perfect. Sometimes I do forget, sometimes I do get frustrated, but I guess when that happens, it's more about getting back and reminding myself of this, reminding myself that that I do have a story, that this approach is not going to work well this way, and taking steps. Why do you feel our stories are important to be told, and how has your story helped you in your experience? Well, I think it's important to be told, but it doesn't have to be told it's not required. I say there's different avenues for you to tell it. I do feel I mentioned this question just because your story can help someone else. That's one thing, but also it is cathartic and maybe a tool or a way to remember. Doesn't mean that you have to tell everyone so openly. Just be an open book. Probably not, because sometimes we can get discouraged if the response of the person is not what we want. Defining why you're telling this story, or why a story is important to be told, and what medium are you using this? Maybe writing in the journal. That even though you're not actually, or sometimes people do a vlog or maybe a blog or just write something. How it is, I find it cathartic to kind of have the ability to kind of continue to be reminded, whatever medium that is. And yeah, you could talk to your family, your friends, your spouse. However, just be mindful of what your expectations of that. And also, a lot of people, unfortunately, are not as available. So, finding ways to tell your story without being so dependent on a reaction that is maybe helpful, because and finding other ways that you could tell without depending on people's availabilities. But I do feel it's important that your story be told, and if you're comfortable enough and you get to that point, it may be something that'd be helpful for those who maybe not there where you're at today. How has your story helped you in your experiences? It shapes how I navigate. I'm constantly more I remind myself of where I've been, more empathetic, more I can recognize when I'm struggling. And if I'm struggling, what has helped and what may not help. And just also stepping back in the idea of mindfulness, and if I do stumble, to understand that this is, there's ways to get back up, and to allow myself that. So I think it has helped in my experience, not ruminating on what was horrible that happened to me, but I am revitalizing my memory of what I have learned and what I've gone through. Taking things seriously, but also keeping things light. We've all made mistakes. We're all human. Whether you're faith-based or not, treating oneself kind, I feel, is paramount to this. This story is not relinquishing everything you've done wrong, but relinquishing and reminding yourself what worked and what didn't. That's it. And if we could get there, I find that it can be very helpful. Final thoughts I have, well, remember our stories, finding hope. A lot of times is an internal thing that starts with you. And it can be very helpful, and especially this time of year, as you may be seeing some family and friends, or you may be missing some family and friends who are no longer with us. Remember their story, remember what you learned, but also as we navigate through health issues, financial struggles, work issues, remember our stories, what worked, and not be influenced just by there's so many suggestions, so many things that if you do this, you'll get this. Your journey, I encourage you, is your journey. So remembering what worked and what doesn't. Like some of the self-help things can be helpful, but only if you want them to be. It's just like goes back to the house or whatever that you cannot afford. If you say I can't afford that, and then let's say you get a windfall and you buy it. The only issue I have with that may present there is that he never took the time to question any of it. Person who says, how can I afford it? And then asks himself, do I really want to have this? It goes a little bit deeper. And I feel we can fall victim of just not taking the time to even ask if we want that thing. So keep questioning, just like Albert Einstein says. I do feel that his emphasis, his approach, and just remembering that you learn from yesterday, live for today, and hope for tomorrow. The important thing is to never stop questioning. Never stop really questioning where you're at, because you yourself do change. And I just want to say, as we enter this month, that if you are struggling, wherever you're at, I do encourage you to find that community at the very least, to start and maybe even ask for help. If it gets serious enough that you're planning or thinking or about ending your life, I do encourage you to call 988, Suicide Crisis Lifeline, or, as I said, wherever you are in the world, they may have a suicide hotline or emergency line. I do encourage you to contact them immediately. There's more of the other hotlines around the world on the website. You can check it out and see if that might be helpful. But a lot of times these numbers may change, so I do encourage you to find what is current in your area. Again, remember to stay updated with Revive Ministries through the various platforms. ReviveMinstriesFL.com is our website. Leaving you this last Chinese proverb. It says, a A bird does not sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song.